Let us pray. O God, wherever we are, your Holy Spirit is present with us. In this space, may your Spirit reorient our lives in you. May the words that I speak and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I want to pose to you a discussion question that I used to use with high school age students when I was a leader of a summer camp experience years and years ago. You know, those adolescent years that are such a wonderful identity searching, passionate, questioning, idealistic time in our lives. Actually, that description of adolescence makes me want to rekindle some of those gifts in our lives. If you're older than that, looking back on age 18 or 16 or 14, wouldn't it be a gift to recapture some of that passion and idealism and searching for identity? And if you're that age right now, 17, 15, or younger than that, what a wonderful time this is in your life. And I want to tell you that those who are older, we adults need your questions. We need your passion. We need your searching kind of sense to help us to remember to search for what is most valuable and important about our lives. Anyway, this was about 20 or 25 years ago. I would gather with these high school students in this kind of intensive, formative experience where we spent all day together every day and pose this question. Suppose you had met someone that didn't know anything about the Christian faith, was entirely new to Christianity, and this person is interested in learning but doesn't bring any prior knowledge or preconceptions to the conversation. Where would you start? What would you say to this person about Christianity? I'd give everyone a few minutes to make some notes, and then we get back together to see where we are. Maybe you'd like to pause and jot down some notes for yourself. Where would you start? What is most important to share about what the Christian faith is? We gather back together and start to talk. It's a constructive conversation because it's not like there's one right answer that we're looking for. I didn't have a secret key that I was waiting for someone to say. The conversation is constructive because it's illuminating. It helps us to think and to grow in our understanding. Some people came back and began with story. What is Christianity? Well, let me tell you about a person named Jesus of Nazareth who lived 2,000 years ago. And they start to tell the gospel stories. They start to put it into the context of the Jewish faith in which this rabbi called disciples and began to teach to crowds and healed people. They tell a story of faith. Other people came back and focused on belief. What is Christianity? Well, let me tell you what Christians believe. We believe in God. We believe that God created the world and all that is in the universe. We believe that Jesus was God incarnate in human form. Sometimes this conversation would lead to a question about which beliefs were really central to what it means to be Christian, what the Christian faith is. Story and belief, those were maybe the most typical answers, and they're really good ones. Sometimes people came at that question from a different angle. What is Christianity? Let me tell you what Christians seek to do in their lives. Christianity is the practice of love. Christianity is the practice in our lives of God's love in the form of forgiveness and compassion, in the form of generosity, in the form of reverence and worship, in the form of healing and restoration. Christianity is the practice of God's love. Do you see what I mean, that there isn't one right answer? This faith that we share, this faith that God has given us, encompasses a way of life to be practiced. It encompasses an important story or a set of stories for us to remember and tell and learn from throughout our lives. It encompasses a way of belief about God and the world and our place in it. And as our faith matures, each of these areas and elements becomes mutually reinforcing, mutually encouraging of our growth as Christians and the growth of our relationship with one another and with God. I worry that sometimes we get too focused about the belief that Christians have and not as focused on Christianity as a way of life to be practiced. In our definition of Christianity, we get a little bit too focused on belief. I'll put it this way. I've had a number of conversations over the years with people who will say, I'm not sure that I define myself as a Christian because I certainly value the practice of love, the service that we can do for our neighbors, the ways of helping out other people and seeking to forgive and live in good relationships with people. I believe in all of that, but I'm not sure what I believe about God right now. So I'm not sure that I'm a Christian. I've had that conversation in different ways over different years. What I've never had a conversation where someone came to me and said, I'm not sure that I define myself as a Christian because, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus and the Holy Spirit and everything in the scriptures, but, love and service is not really important to me. No one's ever said that. Somehow we think that belief is what is foundational and definitional about Christianity, and this practice part of it is gets left off the center stage. It reminds me of a parable that Jesus told about two sons. The father goes to the first son and says, go out and work in the field. Go work in our fields today. And the first son says, yes, I'll do that, but then never goes to do it. You know how we say that we'll do something to our parents and then we don't do it? I mean, how did Jesus know about this without having kids of his own? Maybe he did some babysitting when he was young, or maybe it's just because Jesus is so insightful about the human condition. This is a reality of our lives, isn't it? The times when we say that we're going to do something, maybe with good intentions, maybe just to please someone in the moment, and then we don't do it. We see ourselves in that mirror, right? So that's the first son. And then the parable continues, and the father goes to the second son and says the same thing. Son, go and work in our fields today. Like this father seems to think about nothing else except getting the work in the fields done. And the second son says, no, and stomps out of the room or something. But then changes his mind or decides to go out after all and goes and puts in a full day's work in the field. Now, Jesus says, which of these sons did the will of the Father? It's a rhetorical question, right? It's a quick little parable that reminds us that there's a difference between saying and doing, or there can be a difference between them. And it's really the doing that counts, right? It's really the doing that makes sense of whatever we might say. What is Christianity? Where do we start with what it means to be Christian? What's at the heart of Christian faith? There's a letter in the New Testament, 1 John, that says that God is love, and those who love live in God, and God lives in them. Those who love live in God, and God in them. In the scripture that we heard today, Jesus was in Jerusalem teaching the crowds and the pilgrims who were there for the Passover festival. And in the midst of this teaching, someone posed a question to him, a question of interpretation, a question about what is central in our faith. Which commandment in the law is the greatest? Where do you start? Jesus answered by quoting two verses from the Torah. The first verse comes in that section where the central affirmation of faith in one God is stated. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And then the part that Jesus quoted here, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And then Jesus quoted from Leviticus, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said that on these two commandments hang all of the law and the prophets. Everything hangs on this. Everything comes down to this foundation of love for God and love for neighbors, and you can build everything else that is important from there. In our church, we remember the answer that Jesus gave as the summary of the law. And almost every Sunday in our worship service, we remember the summary of the law. Love for God and love for neighbors. So it becomes a kind of ritual of checking in with our lives. It becomes a ritual by which the Holy Spirit may be at work in our lives to reorient us. I think of this practice in our worship life to be something like checking the compass when you're making your way through the forest. I had this experience years ago where we were walking through the forest in the Adirondack State Park, and we weren't following any path. We had a topographical map to show us the mountain that we were heading toward, and we had our compasses. And so when you're in the forest and you have your compass, you know the bearing that you want to go, and you check the compass, you check your bearing, and then you have to look around you to make it specific to the world right around you, right? You have to look at your bearing, say, oh, we got a little off that last time, and this is the bearing we want to head, and then you look around you and you say that bearing is headed right for that tree with the brilliant red leaves, maybe, right next to the pine trees. That's where I want to head. And you reorient yourself and you head for those trees. And when you get there, you take the compass out again, check your orientation, check your bearing, and look at the world around you to make it specific. These commandments give us our bearing, and then we look around the world and we make it specific. Remember that love in this context is more than a feeling of affection. That might be present, it might not. Jesus said, love your enemies. It's more than a feeling of affection. Love in this context is the intentional work for the good of others. An intentional working for the good of others. And part of that means to learn about the lives of others, to learn about the lives of our neighbors, especially those whose lives are different from us. And it might take some work to understand their context and what would be good for them. It takes some time to learn what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes. That's how we look around us and make it specific. In this time, we might think about people who are especially vulnerable to the COVID pandemic, those who are vulnerable to infection, or those whose conditions make them more vulnerable to a severe case and to complications. You say, what can we do? What can we do in love for those people? Certainly wearing our masks, certainly making choices that might entail sacrifices to limit the amount of risk and movement and spread. Certainly support for medical research and treatments that will lead to an alleviation of symptoms, that will lead to vaccines, that will lead to safety. Make it specific in the world around you. During this season, we could make it specific by thinking about our faith when we go to vote or deciding whether to vote. Think about that. Voting as an act of love for neighbors, as an act of love for God. This might mean not just voting with an eye toward how my vote might affect my own life, but thinking intentionally about how our votes affect the lives of our neighbors, near and far. Look around and make it specific. What can we do in love for those around us? Is there someone in need of forgiveness and mercy? Is there someone that I need to seek forgiveness from and to restore a relationship? Is there a way that I can be more generous, more involved in other people's lives? So I think about the lives of people who have made a difference for me. Is there a way that I can turn and do that for others? The practices of our faith define us. The Christian faith, the Christian community, this church is a collection of people, and everyone's gifts are important. It is a way of bringing together what we have to offer, our acts of love, our acts of generosity, our acts of healing and restoration, and pulling those together in God's Spirit. The stories that we tell and the beliefs that we share point us to a life that is filled with the practice of God's love. These practices make us who we are. On these practices of love hang everything. Let us pray. Oh, gracious God, help us to keep our bearings. Give us the vision and the wisdom and the courage to live in the practice of your love. Amen.